Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another installment of ISV Connect Live. It's my honor and pleasure to have Saul and Steven from Velrada. And it's great because they're actually doing this from Australia. And of course, I typically do this from Seattle, Washington. So before we welcome them officially to the show, a couple of quick housekeeping items that we typically do each time we launch this. So again, we do these every Monday at 8 o'clock West Coast time. And we really want to just highlight our BizApps ISV ecosystem. And Velrada is no exception to that, where we're going to talk about and go deep about their amazing solution that they bring to market. Throughout this presentation, of course, we'd love to hear where you're watching from. So if you just want to put in the window, type in, maybe you're watching from Australia, maybe you're watching it from somewhere in Europe, or maybe you're watching it from somewhere in the US. If you just want to type in the window, that gives us an opportunity to understand the broad reach that the video is actually making. The other thing you can do is that in the LinkedIn experience, if you just want to do a a support, or whatever you're comfortable with throughout the conversation, that also gives us an indication that the content is actually resonating to the audience. So without further ado, let me put this in the ticker window as well. Without further ado, let me welcome Saul and Steven to the conversation. Thanks, guys, for making the time on your different time zone compared to me, but welcome to the show. So the first thing that let's start out with is, what do each of you guys do at Velrada? And of course, how I love to just introduce people, especially it's a good icebreaker, is what's one thing that you're willing to share that's not in your LinkedIn profile? So Saul, we'll start with you, and then Steven will go to you.
Hey, Brian, thanks very much. And thank you to everyone for tuning in and participating in Brian's activities. He's a great supporter of ISVs around the globe, and we're very pleased to be able to participate. So my role within Velrada is as the managing director, and we're about 200 folks spread across all of the Australia, New Zealand, and UK, and we do a lot of work in the US. We've been Global Partner of the Year for Field Service, and this year are currently the Australian Growth Partner of the Year. So I'm very excited to be able to participate and continue the strong Microsoft Dynamics journey. One thing that's not on my LinkedIn profile is that my 3 daughters are driving and are learning to navigate the roads, and that's a very exciting time for a parent, as I'm sure many of you will experience who have children who are learning to drive.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that, Saul, because my oldest daughter in the States, I'm not sure what the age limit is to start driving, but in the US it's 15. And so I totally relate. And it might be different too, because of course in Australia compared to the US, you drive on the other side of the road.
That's right.
And roundabouts, we don't have a lot of roundabouts here, but the ones that do, it does confuse people, especially drivers who've never come across it before. But so I totally relate. And I can't imagine having 3 at the same time trying to do it, because I only have to worry about 1. And 1 is hard enough.
Yeah, indeed. It is a very, very interesting time to be a parent, but everybody gets through it. So yeah, exciting.
That's right. Well, thanks for that great introduction, Saul. So Steven, we'll go to you.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for watching and taking the time to see this. So my role within Velrada is I'm the National Cloud Services Lead, and then I also wear a second hat as the EAM Connect product owner. So EAM Connect for us is that asset intensive product and integration between your finance and operations business app and field service, and it's that connected world that bridges those 2 things together. So I'm very active in that space. Probably not a lot outside of LinkedIn that you wouldn't find from within there, but I love to travel. So any chance I get to go into country, interstate, or navigate around the globe, I've volunteered pretty much forcefully. So I've implemented things within the US, Europe, and so on. So as much as possible, I like to get out and about, and I enjoy that change in culture and lifestyle, and particularly in food. Very strong influence in food is if there's a nice unique dish to that area, I am keen to try it.
I love it, Steven. Well, I mean, the pandemic has definitely put it in a kibosh, because I had the same thing. It's like, for me, my specific role as the global leader of the BizApps business, going to all over the world in different places. And of course, I can't wait for that to come back. But one thing before we get started and like more details is, what's your most favorite place you've been to?
Probably the standard one. So New York and Paris for me were just standouts. My background's also from Rome through my folks. So those 3 there are top of the pops. If I get a chance to go there, I'm there immediately. But I've been around to Singapore and other areas like that, and just anything that's different and unique, I'm really keen to explore it.
I love it. Well, I guess I could have taken note because your last name is Italian, but then of course I sense no Italian accent. It's all Australian.
No, very Australian, very strong Australian.
That's right. That's
right.
Well,
this is Australia. We're a land of immigrants. I think we have of our 200 folks, I think something like 75 or 80% are genuinely born outside of Australia. It's a very multicultural industry, and we're a very multicultural organization.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, Australia and Sydney is one of my favorite spots, and that is the one place where you guys are at in Perth. I haven't made it to the west side of the country. Everything of my travels have been in the east side, and also, if you could believe it, Darwin. I've also been to Darwin, and people are like, "Wow, you've been to Darwin?" I'm like, "Yes, I had my early career in a different software company. There, we actually had a customer in the Darwin area. It was an amazing experience to go up there." So let's get straight to the conversation. So between the two, you, Saul and Steven, give us a sense for what does Velrada do to drive amazing innovation and, of course, business outcomes with our joint customers.
Sure. So look, we've kind of been in business for about 12 years doing dynamics in a big way. And as the product has evolved, and we've all kind of been on that journey. I mean, I'm personally been doing CRM from 1.0, if anybody can remember, before some people were born. So very exciting. And as the products matured out, we're very good at applying that technology to our customers, and certainly where we took the next leap, if you like, around the asset intensive world was serving many of our customers who in fact were providing services to large mining and asset based organizations here in Western Australia. And so what that did is kind of teach us around how do we take field service, how do we take FinOps, and how do we apply areas of expertise where we're seeing use cases every day and kind of plugging those holes and then creating a lot of innovation around that. And some of that innovation has even come through with HoloLens, mixed reality, remote assist guides. We've got quite a large practice in there. We've served about 30 odd customers globally in our mixed reality business. And again, a lot of that is around many of our organizations who are in that asset intensive world, looking to do things differently, not only because of the pandemic and the lack of travel, but the ability really just to optimize costs and reduce travel. So, Velrada really does look at, what's Microsoft bringing to the market, and then how do we take it and apply it to many of our customers so that we can actually offer that value and then differentiate, right? Because it's a competitive marketplace and there are many partners trying to do the same thing. And of course, we're all competing with the SAPs and the Oracles and the like. And so we're trying to find that way in where we're actually setting up a regime and a rhythm that's different for our customers so they can get more value out of the investments in Microsoft. And obviously, as we continue to invest in our IP, we're able to leverage that and increase the margins that we're able to achieve on projects because of our IP that we're able to bring.
I love it, Saul. So maybe you or Steven can touch upon when you say assets, not just the people aspect of it, but maybe you could describe what does assets mean to Velrada in relationship to the outcomes that you're driving, to your point, with field service and these scenarios, especially when you need the right resource to apply to fixing something or having someone on site. So
yeah, and this is something that we've been working with for a number of years through different types of technology stacks and suites. So starting with your field worker out in the field maintaining the specific asset, and those assets could vary from buildings to grounds to trucks and mobile device kind of things. So the asset can mean very different things to very different and unique places. So here we've done a lot of work around oil and gas and mining. So those assets differ from, let's say, your property and real estate. So those are the types of things that we deal with in terms of the technician out in the field. But then we also deal with our asset teams and around the management and maintenance plans on those assets. So that might be budgeting across the year. It might be coordinating purchase orders and procurement of assets, installations and refurbishments. So the asset itself could also be a fixed asset, a financial play on that particular asset. So the word asset's really going to be defined by the client and the various asset types that within there form their business model. And a lot of that's around facilities maintenance and facilities management, but that also is something that we do around hospitals and hospitality, and also around real estate and those kind of things. So really a diverse portfolio of the types of assets and industries that manage and maintain assets. Even universities, for example, we do a lot of work around campus management and those kind of things. So yeah, very, very varied in the definition of it. But what's consistent across them is how do we get the people out in the field, those technicians, all the information they need to go out there and do the job they need and bring all that information back so that our asset team can understand what's happened out on the field. And the combination of those is that's your field service and your finance and operations enterprise asset management platforms in the technical speak. And what we also do at Velrada is offer an advisory arm to all of this. So how do we encourage our clients to adopt, train, change behaviors, change processes to make all these things possible, practical, and in a timely fashion. So it's not a 12-month project, it's a 3-month rollout. And those kind of things are really important for our clients.
Well said, Stephen and Saul. And I think about some of those things you talked about, not just the oil and gas space, but you talked about healthcare. You talked about facility management, education. And I think my understanding in past conversations, I think government and justice play a role. So maybe you could touch on upon like all these use case scenarios in the different industries. I think retail plays a role, manufacturing plays a role.
Absolutely. So we do a lot of work over here in WA, at least, with Department of Finance that manages a lot of the schools and the maintenance of those schools. And this could be things like hazard condition assessments, so asbestos containing materials and those kind of things are critically important. They're legislated, so these reports have to be provided back to state government and ministers to understand what's happening in those spaces. So tools like this support those field workers capturing that, but also apply standards. So how do you define what the standard condition is on a specific asset? It needs very precise rules around it and constraints, so that no two people going out to assess it are going to come out with varied results. You want consistent results, even though you might have different people each year doing the inspections and those kind of things. Around universities, for example, it's a very different approach. Theirs is more around maintaining the estates in a practical way so that they can enrich the students, make it a really good experience for them. So they want all the very best facilities maintained to a certain high standard as well. So, but for very different reasons. So theirs is around that student excitement. How can we excite our students in a very natural way? And then healthcare is again very, very different for what they need in their space, and they could be maintaining things for very different reasons. So yes, you have your buildings and very similar things to what your governments are needing, and the legislation and governance over that's quite strict. But then they also have the added complexity of having to maintain things like beds and wheels on those beds, and gets very, very granular into the type of components they need to manage. And that can get quite complex for them as well, because those beds are mobile. They might not be in the same place twice. So how do you get that information back to technicians and that to know exactly which bed that they're picking up and moving across? So all those things there means it's a challenge for us to work with our clients and understand what their requirements are. And that's that advisory arm to really understand the hierarchy of a particular asset, the facilities they're dealing with. That's going to change their asset types and the maintenance of those. But it's also going to change how the technicians interact with those assets as well. So everything needs to be very simple, easy to use for that particular role that's applying these particular changes. And that makes my job quite fun, because it's never the same kind of implementation twice. It's always very different and unique to that particular industry, which is it's quite fun for me. It makes it all fresh every time.
Yeah, and you think about all the things you just said, Stephen. It's like, gosh, the broad use cases across these different scenarios basically serves different purposes, but the outcomes that you're driving, and this is a good lead into the next kind of conversation of how has Velrada's experience been in the Microsoft ecosystem? Because one of the things that's amazing about what you do is you talked about it. You talked about kind of the typical experience with field service, customer service, but then how do you traditionally then connect the quote unquote CRM component to the back office, which is ERP and the assets and the finance component of it. And you guys do that well with the assets. Plus on top of what you do with Teams or in the Power Platform. So maybe Saul, we can go back to you. Maybe you can talk about, and then we can go back to you, Steven, talk about just what has that experience been like? And again, it's great because to your point, Saul's background of Inner Circle and Microsoft Partner of the Year in certain areas is fantastic because that's not easy to do because we have many partners all over the world vying for that type of thing. And particularly your Inner Circle recognition is quite worthy because that's a very unique distinction that only is given to a very small subset of Dynamics partners. So give us a sense for what's the kind of experience been like as you've worked with the Microsoft teams, particularly not just in Australia, but all over the world.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Look, I mean, I think, one of the things we've learned for many years is if we understand what drives a Microsoft seller in terms of their particular KPIs, whether that's at a regional level, obviously at a local level, the motivations for these sellers is really where we try and align our activities. So when we're kind of engaging for the first time with a customer, we really do look at very heavily at the license component and how the Microsoft EA is going to get renewed and what that then will drive from a KPI to help the individual Microsoft seller achieve their outcomes. And then we look at how our services component will be able to come into play to actually do the deployment, implementation, and then ongoing managed services for that particular customer. Sorry, Brian. I'm not seeing anything on the screen. Sorry. Oh, there we go. You've just come back. I wasn't sure if you were recording. Apologies.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no. So that's great, Saul. Just how you said, like working with the Microsoft ecosystem and our co-sell experience, because that's one of the huge opportunities of why not just the technology, but why organizations and partners like yourself drive that engagement because of that strong co-sell experience, because we don't do what you guys do. Like there's components of our first party experience where when we go into these use cases that Steven went into, we run into the fact that, wow, there's a huge market opportunity for Velrada and other organizations to drive that amazing use cases that have been described.
Yep. One scenario that we had last year, which was very exciting, is there is an annual conference amongst countries called the G7, where the 7 senior countries in the world meet. And last year it was in Cornwall, Devon and Cornwall in the UK. And we participated by supplying our power roster into the management and the rostering of the workforce, where 6,000 police officers came in from all over the UK to be able to participate in that particular event. Now, our kind of route to market there was by demonstrating our, ISV product power roster to a bunch of GBBs, global black belts, obviously, within the US and UK contingent. They then, in turn, were being having conversations with the UK Home Office, who had identified that they were potentially looking for a rostering solution for this particular event. The Microsoft seller there brokered the conversation, Palm. It was a very successful outcome. We are co-sell ready. Palm obviously managed to, get his KPIs met. We achieved outcomes that we were looking for, and really was a win-win, all round in terms of the customer got an outcome, Microsoft got an outcome, and Velrada got an outcome. And that's really, how we want to think about the ecosystem. And ISV, Connect has been a very, very strong program for us. We're listed in the App Source, the App Store. Yes, it's a bit of effort to kind of get it all certified and make sure that, the application meets all the standards, but that's obviously, makes perfect sense for us. And so then be able to bounce off that and be able to leverage and, participate in activities like this really then drives that ongoing, engagement with the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, it's great, Saul. And I agree. It's like, gosh, your opportunity to deploy anywhere. And I think that's the biggest thing is even though, of course, you're based in Australia, the fact that your solution can be leveraged very quickly to the use case you described. And I think it's amazing when you think about like, how would someone typically do that and bring a whole bunch of police officers in that scenario? I can imagine back in the day, well, even recently, there's still people who were like, okay, let me pull an Excel spreadsheet or let me quickly use a SharePoint site and kind of manage all this stuff, which is kind of ineffective because at the end of the day, you need to have all these assets and resources and manage the scheduling and all these people and their experiences all coming together as part of the business process. And I think that's the biggest thing is how you guys have really created better business outcomes because you're working through that business process end to end.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think, Microsoft for many years have been pushing partners, which were traditional service partners, down a path of productizing IP, taking a vertical approach, which has been talked about for, nearly 20 years. And I think, what we've seen is the opportunities to really take that knowledge and that IP through hard fought, in the trenches customer experience, and then being able to productize it. And that then provides, as I said earlier, an increased margin, which is healthy for our business, but it's also a fast time to value. It accelerates deployments for our customers. The Microsoft sales team get excited because their sales cycles can be sped up and can be, their KPIs can be achieved much faster than a traditional, services play, which has a very long implementation phase. And so, when you look at taking that IP and accelerating go-to-markets, and that becomes very exciting. And customers get the benefit, right? Because they're ultimately really accelerating their time to value. Their internal stakeholders, will have commitments met in terms of timeframes and expectations around what they're able to achieve and when they can see value. And getting to that value faster is really what it's all about, because otherwise, we fall into the victim of the large SAP or the large Oracle projects that almost never go live and are very expensive and time confusing, and give the industry a bad name. And what we're seeing with our very fast time to value is that our stakeholders can make commitments to their internal folks about speed and time to value very much on an accelerated time frame, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, and I thank you for covering that, Saul, because that also, when we think about the ecosystem, not just with Microsoft, but the opportunity that this presents to software integrators who are doing deployments in these type of use case scenarios. And typically they go in and go, okay, I can probably create something from scratch using the technology to get to the outcome, versus what you described, Saul, being able to say, okay, yes, there still has to be some customization involved, but taking an amazing solution that's listed in Marketplace AppSource to leverage that and starting rather than from square one, starting from maybe 50-60% of that capability that then does configuration. And maybe that can go, that's a good segue to you, Steven, to talk about, because of course you're in the front lines doing deployments and seeing all these use cases. Maybe you can describe, as Saul talked about, maybe your favorite use case scenario. You talked about some of them, but maybe you can go deep on what's a really good customer example that you've worked on, or maybe you're recently working on right now, that kind of, again, really reinforces all this amazing outcomes when you think about asset capabilities to rostering, all these amazing innovations that can bring value to an end customer.
Yeah, and I think especially in the asset management space, there's so many requirements to go through, and people picture things in very different ways. And for us, the go-to-market is not just about then fast tracking, which is critically important for timelines, but also it plays a part in people can describe what they don't want quicker when they see something, and they can drive the requirements by showing and telling. So a lot of what the ISV and what we're doing to implement also helps us with the communications around what is actually required and how do we get there. So defining those through show and tell, even if it's a prototype, and then getting to the answers that we need for them in a shorter time frame is incredibly important. If they had to start from the traditional ways of let's write down everything we need, then let's go to market and try to pick one that's got all of these requirements that meets perfectly, and then go into installing it, it takes too long. If they can just go in there and say, look, we like this space, we need something that's going to fast track it. Can we see it in action? The ISV market allows them to actually see what they're about to get in a shorter time frame, and then from there they can work out, well, where are the gaps that we have in our requirements, and then we build on from there. So the eAIM Connect for us is an accelerator for that reason. Asset management is so different from so many different industries. It can't just be a product that you drop in there. It has to be something that is malleable and that the client can then make their own. But it starts from a baseline. It starts from something very simple that meets all the needs of an asset management system, as well as a field services system. And then how do we bridge those gaps then becomes essentially where the vendors such as ourselves can come in and tailor it then to suit either the industry that we're targeting, healthcare versus education versus facilities management, or that specific client or contract, which also can be very unique. Even within the clients that we deal with, they have contracts that are very specific to that contract. And as a result, we have to do a number of consults, if you like, workshops and those things to work out what's your asset hierarchy, what are the asset types, what type of people and processes do you have. And then other things like Power Roster then feed into that. So when they start talking about their resources within that world, Power Roster then feeds in nicely into that same world. And then we also find things like within the Microsoft world, the Power Apps and Power Automate and that whole Power Platform space then becomes the natural conversation straight after that is any of those gaps. Well, we don't want to create code for those things. That's right. No one really wants to go down that path. So it's a natural play then into some of those other areas like the Power Platform. And it could be for their portals, it could be for approval systems, or it could be for specific forms that they need to build for a very targeted or specific area of their business. And all of a sudden now we have this no code to low code solution for them is asset intensive and competitive and has that user experience that they're after as well, because they don't have time for change management and training. They really need something that's really easy to adopt. It's very simple to use. It's in their terminologies, so the labels fit their terminologies and they're not static ones that are generic that don't mean anything to them and they have to repurpose. Oh, this field means this thing. No, Power Apps allows us to really target exactly their industry and what they're after. And I think that whole play for us is really good, and Microsoft support us all the way through that, from meeting the client all the way through to the implementation as well with their, if we're in that cloud space, it's that well-architected framework and the fast track team. And again, very similarly, when we're standing up FinOps, it still has to go through that fast track approval, and they're right on board with how we do that, which is great for us.
I love it, Steven. And you hit it around the head, is that all those use cases that you and Saul talk about with those different industries, it's not one size fits all. Like when you think about justice system to education to oil and gas, you can't use, granted, the field value has to be very specific to that use case, or even the one that Saul mentioned with the police officers in the UK. Being able to take that foundation that you guys have built and really quick time to market, change things around, which I think is a fantastic example of the power that you guys can bring on top of of course, the scenarios and the solutions that we're providing as that joint scenario. So as we get closer to the end, gosh, it's hard to believe, like we've been chit-chatting for almost half an hour. So let's kind of wrap it up and just talk about like what would be any last minute comments, but also how do people learn more? Because of course we might have other Microsoft employees have never heard of you guys before. Like, what are some of the things they should be thinking about? Partners, because we do have potential software integrators that are doing deployments in these. What should they be thinking about? And then it'd be great if we have a customer that fits one of those use cases that maybe come across this on LinkedIn, maybe not just live, but maybe a month from now or a few weeks from now or a few days from now, like, oh, wow, this is super interesting. How would they, what would be your recommendation to learn more, besides just, of course, using LinkedIn and saying, hey, connect with Saul, connect with Steven on LinkedIn, ask questions? What would be your kind of conversations to how people learn more?
Yep, cool. Thanks, Brian. So look, obviously we're super keen to expand out our product offering and the value for our customers. So from a Microsoft seller's perspective, definitely able to engage on a global basis. We do that every day. So feel free to reach out either via the app source listing or directly through, contacts via our website, velrada.com and powerworker.com, and you'll be able to find our contact details there. But also we're very keen to partner with other organizations. So we do this today. We have a very strong partnering model in place. We can come to an arrangement on all the partner agreements, all the protections of IP and the invoicing and so on, and all the usual things that you would expect. Certainly in an ISV community, it's obviously a strong value proposition to be able to work with other partners from an implementation perspective. We're very happy to have other organizations be a reseller of our IP and for us to participate and share with them. And then we don't have to own the customer. We're working with partners across Western Europe and the US right now on this basis, and very keen to expand out our ecosystem, which is a very common model, as everyone knows. So yeah, feel free to reach out via the powerworker.com or velrada.com or back through Brian, or your usual Microsoft connection. So we're getting connected from Microsoft sellers literally in every state in the US at the moment, getting a lot of interest around this asset intensive world. There are many organizations in our ecosystem who are exploring Microsoft versus SAP versus Oracle versus Salesforce versus Maximo, etc., versus IFS. And so therefore, we want to demonstrate that we've got a value proposition in the Microsoft ecosystem that can, be better than the traditional incumbents or anyone looking for a new implementation around this world. So very strong use cases, very strong reference sites, and we can certainly help you. Absolutely.
That's great. Hey, Steven, anything you want to add from your side?
Yeah, other than just working with partners and working with Microsoft to deliver outcomes for our clients or their clients, these are the things that we enjoy doing. This is what we're in it for. So, the channels into those, we're very flexible, and like I said, we're in it for the outcomes. And if the outcomes are positive for both the partner, for Microsoft, and for the client, then we're ecstatic. So for us, it's all about making the Microsoft play in those spaces and making our clients essentially love everything that they're receiving. That's the key focus for us.
That's great. Fantastic. And then one last link, and then of course Saul talked about it too, but if you wanted to go directly to one of the solutions that is actually listed in the marketplace that we were talking about during the show, if you just go to aka.ms/power roster, that actually links you directly to the solution that again provides more details. So that being said, Akash, thank you, Steven and Saul, for making the time. The one thing I will close on is that we do have about a 4-minute video that, for those of you who want to stay on, that Saul and Steven had shared with me. So in the spirit of, as we end these type of conversations, there's a quick video at the end that you can stay on and watch. But any closing thoughts, Saul and Steven, before we close out the call?
Oh, look, thanks, Brian, for having us on today. Really exciting. Obviously, we like participating in these, video casts, podcasts. It's a great mechanism. Obviously, LinkedIn's a fantastic tool, and, all credit to Microsoft for that investment. So hopefully, this gives you some traction and ourselves as well. So thank you for having us on today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Very enjoyable.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, take care, everybody. The one thing I should have mentioned too, because I'm wearing this sweatshirt specifically, enjoy the Olympics. It's hard to believe the Olympics are actually just like granted, several thousand miles above you, but the fact that it's happening right now, which Olympics is hard to believe. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the Olympics.
And Australia won a medal yesterday, so well done to the Australians.
Oh yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Australia. How's it go? Something.
Oi.
Yeah, oi. So anyway, thanks again, Velrada team. Pleasure. Thank you for making the investment. Thank you everybody for watching. Continue to be safe and enjoy this 4-minute clip of their solution. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
There are just under 2 billion mobile workers in the world. More than just working from home, on-site workers can perform tasks in the field, collaborate remotely, and be closer to the customer, thanks to cloud computing and even artificial intelligence. John wakes up and checks his Power Roster app. He can see all the duties he has today. He's a police officer, but since the lockdowns began, he hasn't set foot in a station. He can see the maps of where he has to go today. The app is his connection to the rest of the force. Stacy is a coordinator in the Operations Center for the Water Authority. She's managing about 100 plumbers and engineers in the field. Power Worker helps her to assign jobs to her team and make sure the workers know where to go, that they arrive on time, and have the right equipment to do the job. She can click on a screen and see a list of leave requests and shift change requests and reassign the jobs. David is the head of HR for a multinational organization. With a workforce stretching into the thousands, he knows that mistakes in the field snowball into costly blowouts that impact the company's bottom line. He can tell at a glance how many positions are staffed and where the gaps are in the plan. More than that, his company genuinely cares about the health, well-being, and engagement of their entire team. John, Stacy, and David are all using Velrada's Power Worker platform, which helps organizations manage large workforces, particularly in field services. Power Roster was deployed at the G7 Summit in Cornwall to coordinate 6,000 police officers from 47 different forces. Every single officer could check their individual schedule. The app showed information about their accommodation, and officers could coordinate shift swaps between any of the other 6,000 officers. For example, a superintendent could see information about their team and see where they were located at any point in time. Power Worker is a complete platform with functionality that allows for end-to-end management of any large workforce. Power Roster is a digital rostering system. Power Flight for all travel logistics. Power View for augmented reality assistance for workers in the field. Power Team, a collaboration tool for remote workers. Power Safe, a mobile health, safety, compliance, and sustainability app. Power Plan, a tool for head offices to forecast resources requirements. And Field to Finance, a tool to track fleets, assets, and IoT telemetry from the technician to the finance system. The Power Worker suite of apps integrates with Microsoft technology, including Teams and Dynamics 365, to manage large workforces. Power Worker can be used for the end-to-end management of large teams. For example, police, firefighters, mining, oil and gas, healthcare, major utilities, travel, retail, fast food chains, logistics, and pretty much any organization that manages a big or remote workforce. It's an important tool for employee well-being, allowing people to get on with their jobs while still being connected to the head office. For organizations, it improves their operational efficiency, which is also essential for meeting environmental, social, and governance objectives. Mistakes in the field create waste, not only wasted time, but wasted natural resources. Velrada's Power Worker platform is Microsoft's field management solution for remote workforces at scale. So when asked who will benefit from Power Worker, well, the answer is the entire world. Velrada is creating a better tomorrow with its Power Worker platform. To find out more, visit velrada.com.